So here's how we're going to roll. Here's what we do on the last day of class. You ask me questions, and I formulate an answer, a response. So who's got a question about anything? It could be the class, could be life, could be whatever, anything at all.
I was wondering if you could give us some insight on the model minority myth.
It's the idea that we apply to people of Asian ancestry, that people of Asian ancestry are really like perfectly suited for life in the U.S. They're really hardworking. They are highly educated. They don't need help. They're not poor. They're not, all these things that go along with that. And so therefore, when we think about people of Asian, East Asian in particular, there are no social services that are required because they're fine. But the truth is that people of Asian, it's kind of like bifurcated, so to speak, right? Like half of all Asians do really, really well, are highly educated, they come to the United States educated, et cetera, and half, or less than half now, are really struggling. And so we don't, like the Hmong people, Cambodians, Vietnamese often are really, really struggle.
What's an important or substantial thing that you've learned that you think is hard for other people to learn? And how did you do it?
So I have something that I've learned that's hard for me to learn. It's hard for me to stay with it. I'm going to say what it is, and you're all going to say oh yeah, I can see that, but you're going to struggle with it for 20 or 30 or 40 years. Even though it might be in your brain, you're still going to struggle with it, because that's the nature of the human condition, I think. It's a very simple thing, and if when you get it, it gives you inner peace, because this is the foundation of all religions, all spiritual perspectives. This is the foundation, really, of everything. Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, everything, Islam, the whole thing. Everything we do and everything that happens to us has positive and negative consequences, okay? So everything. Doesn't matter. Like this weekend, if it rains, it's like, one of your classmates you're the opening act, right, for Moving On? Dude, he's got a kid, Mellow Honey, what is it? Mellow Honey? Dude, show up, go to Moving On and check out the opening act. Mellow Honey, it's your classmate here. Awesome, man. Really, really, really popping. It's going to rain, though. You guys are going to play in the rain, and you're going to think oh, that's bad. But because you played in the rain, something positive is going to happen. It won't matter. And so everything, right? The grades you get, every single thing, every door you walk through has positive and negative consequences. Every good thing that happens will bring some bad consequences. And every bad thing that happens will bring some good consequences. You see? So it doesn't matter what it is. The job that you think you want so much, it's going to bring some bad stuff with it. The bad thing that happens to you that you think oh, I wish that never happened to me, it's going to bring good stuff with it. And when you get to a certain age, I can look back at my path in life and I see all the bad stuff that happened to me, the things I didn't want to happen, and all the great things that came out of it. And when you get that lesson, when you really understand that lesson, you can stop yearning for things. It doesn't matter. You can take the quiz in Social 19 and you don't need an A. You do not need an A in this class. You don't need anything. You just don't need it, because everything all good things are given to us. And so, oh God, I'm only here. It just doesn't matter. It's just that's the lesson. Yeah. And now my job is to live that every day, and I get much closer to living it today than I did yesterday or 10 years ago or whatever. So,
do you have any advice for us, people in college, people graduating?
Well, what I told her, that's probably if you just meditated on that, if you thought about it, everything that happens to you that you're unhappy about, you don't get the job you want, the internship, all that kind of bad stuff, realize that positive things will happen. and all the good stuff that happens, and you're like floating high and like, oh, this is going to be great. Understand that right behind the next door is something that you're not going to want. Like, that's the thing. So like you never get too high or you never get too low. You just live life and you live it in the moment, because the moment is where inner peace exists, right? It's like this is the nature of being present to life, right? So you be present to the experience, because that's all we have. So if you just do that and you really work with it every single day, and what happens is you start getting used to when those good things happen, you don't let yourself get thrown off by thinking how great those things are, because you throw off, because then when the next thing happens, when as a result of that, like I walk through this door over here, right? Because that's the door I'm going through, but on the other side of the door is something eventually that is problematic. Then what happens is I get off that roller coaster. You know, it's like a roller coaster. You're up, you're down, you're up, you're down, you're up, you're down. And where you want to be is just in this place where every moment you live, man. That's the nature. That's what all this prayer, that's what prayer is about. So everybody prays to. That's what meditation's about. So I guess I would say that. The other thing is this. I know you all have a mantra for needing to make money. Okay, there's this idea, you got to make money, right? When you lead with making money, you stumble at having inner peace. The goal, you get one life, and it's going to be over. And this sounds like a cliche. Hey, Nish, I'm ready. We can do a couple from like the stream. It kind of sounds like a cliche, but like all we have are the moments in our lives. And when we miss those, it doesn't matter how much money we have. If you miss that, if you miss being present to all the moments, which are infinite, then you've missed out on life. And I know that you all have this idea, well, I need to do things I want to travel, and I don't make much money. I've never made much money. My wife and I don't make much money. We just are very careful about not spending it on things that we don't need to spend it on. And we do the things we really want to do. So I've never owned a new car. You know, like I never, ever have. I don't waste money. I just don't. It's like I'm very careful. So I would say that. You don't need as much money as you think you do.
I feel like you do a lot of really interesting topics in here, but like what was like the most controversial, or like the one that got you in like the most like trouble with like either like the school or like anybody?
First of all, I've never been in trouble with the school, you know, really. Because there's a sense of because I've been really connected to all of the administrations. The current administration I'm not connected to. I haven't met the president. But the other presidents, you know, I just knew. And so like they had a trust. So when they get phone calls or when they get whatever, you know, like there's a trust that I'm not a lunatic. Yeah, so I don't get in trouble in that way. I get in trouble with my wife, because what happens is she's the PR person, and when something happens, she's the one that has to figure out how we're going to work it out. What I'm going to say, what I'm not going to say, and like she doesn't like doing that, and then she gets really pissed. So it's like, you said what? Did you effing really say that in class? I'm like, yeah, man, but it wasn't so bad in the moment. Like it wasn't bad coming out of my mouth, but yeah, it kind of looks bad. Yeah, okay, I can see that kind of stuff, you know. I guess every topic, and many topics are kind of controversial. They're not to me because I have the curiosity of like a little kid, you know what I mean? Like I have a lot of curiosity, so it's not controversial to me. But it can be for other people, you know, so yeah.
What's the worst trouble you've ever gotten yourself into, not Fox News?
I did one time have to go, I was in the Ecuador with a priest, and we were going into the jungle, and we hit these military checkpoints, and I didn't have my passport. So he had this really wise, smart idea to have me hide in the back of his car as the soldiers were checking, the car, right? And which was fine. We got through a couple different checkpoints, but the problem is I didn't have a password to get back out. And I was stuck there. And I had to kind of escape back out, you know what I mean? So I didn't realize until it actually happened how much trouble I potentially was in, and that I would land in jail. And I would say that maybe is I haven't thought of that in a long time. Huh.
I just wanted to ask, what place in the world did you go to gave you the most culture shock, would you say?
I think Japan. Yeah. Only because it was the first place in East Asia that I went. Had I gone to Korea first, I think maybe I would say Korea, but I would say Japan. For some reason, I immediately, it was just like nothing I'd ever, shock isn't like shock. Like, it was like, it's not shock like a shock to my body, but just as a sociologist, me realizing that I walked into a field of culture that I had no way of understanding. Yeah, I would say that.
I lived in Saudi Arabia my whole life, so I never really traveled, and then I came to America when I was 19 for college. So I was curious, have you ever gone to Saudi? And I want to see what culture shock you've experienced.
Yeah, so I've been to the Gulf countries many times. I've been to Qatar probably like 10 times, and the Emirates 4 times, I think, Kuwait, Iraq. I've never been to Saudi. I was invited once, but I wasn't able to go. And I've been invited to Iran a couple times, but the Iranians wouldn't give me a visa, so... but I want to go to Saudi actually. So
you should.
Yeah, I'm waiting for some Saudi to sponsor me.
What's your craziest story ever?
Here, I'll tell you a crazy story. I'll tell you a really fascinating story, right? So back in probably like 25 years ago, there was a guy, Native American shaman, who was living in the area, okay? And I don't know where I met him or somehow I heard of him. So I invited him into class, right? Not this class. It was a different class, smaller version. This dude he was on a different plane, man. Like this guy was, he was not in this world. Let me just say that, right? Let's go do a sweat lodge with this guy. So we did. A sweat is where you are invoking the spirits in the lodge is like a small space that's covered, and you heat rocks like really. This is all. It's not just rock. You don't just go grab the rocks. You know what I mean? This is like a deep process. But anyway, we start the sweat, and he's praying, and he's playing his drum, and he's singing, and he's praying, and he's invoking the spirits in, and we're all sitting around on the ground, in a circle, right, like this. And like suddenly I feel my body I feel stuff happening in my body, right? And suddenly my body just twists and contorts, and I have to get out of the sweat. Like I just sort of drag myself out of the sweat, and I fall on the ground. And I don't know. Yeah. Okay. So you can catch it. So I drag myself out, and I fall, and I'm laying like this, and I start singing, and I'm singing this song that is not of my language, and I just keep singing it, and I don't know the words. I don't know. I have no idea what's happening, and I stop. And I start over again, and I don't remember a lot of it. Some of it people had to tell me, but I sing it even louder, and I'm just singing as loud as I can sing, and I just keep doing it till finally I just kind of pass out. So what happened to my body in that moment, right? So I've had 3 different times in my life when my body has been taken over by spirits. One time was in a temple outside of Tokyo that I was meditating, and I went to this, these are 2 stories in one, by the way. So I went to this temple, and there were all these Buddha statues, and I started meditating a little bit, but I was with somebody else, and I had to go. But something said, you got to go back there. So 2 days later, I go back. It was like an hour and a half outside of Tokyo, and something just said, dude, you got to go back there. And I walk in this temple. There are these steps going up to it. They're like maybe 200 or 300 steps. And I get to it, and in a minute, I get in the temple, and I sit down, and I start meditating. It's like, boom. And my body, I'm not in control of my body, right? It's like these spirits just called me in, and my body just starts moving. I don't want to say any more than that. But like, so 2 of 3 times where my body was taken over. But with in the sweat, 2 days later, I am listening to a story on the radio. I swear this is as true as it could possibly be true. It's one of these things, like you could make it up, you could think it's true, and for the longest time I kept thinking I'm making this up, like I'm thinking it's true, but I'm listening to this story about a sweat experience by an indigenous tribe out in the Northwest, okay? And I'm listening, and they start singing a song, chanting a song. I'm like, oh my God, right? That was the song. And you know, when you live enough, you know, I talk a lot about, you know, you got to live a certain life. You have to see things happen. And when you see things that, you know, I don't know, you have different experiences. But anyway, okay, those are 2. How's that? It's kind of not funny, but.
That was awesome. Thank you.
Okay, all right, Mel.
I was just wondering if you're religious.
That's a really complex question. I pray all the time. I pray.
Do you pray to something specific?
No. I pray for understanding. I think there's an energy that connects all of us. Mm-hmm. I'm really fascinated by life after death. So I spend in reincarnation. I spend a lot of time listening to stories, reading about stories. Like, I'm really, really fascinated by it. I want to know, like I would say consumed by it. No, not consumed in a bad way, but as much time as I can spend, yeah. So, no, do I believe there's like a singular God that created things? No. That makes no sense to me, because something had to create the God. Like, that just makes no sense. So, but I understand that that's a perspective, right? Mm-hmm. But I think there's an energy, a life force, and I don't know how much intentionality it has. I think it's like what John was saying the other day, given so much of what I see, I'm not sure it has a lot of intentionality.
So do you have like an idea for what happens after death, or are you still like searching for that?
No, I think I do.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. You want to hear it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
Well, listen, but I don't know, like, the only thing you can do, the only way we can possibly begin to understand, and even this is a very difficult thing, is you got to find people who have died. Like, their heart stops, their brain stops operating, and then they are somehow resuscitated and revived, and they come back and they tell about what their experience is, right? Like, that's the only way. And so people who have died for long periods of time in particular, so not everyone remembers, but many, many people do. And what we're finding around the world, in all cultures, everywhere, is a very, very similar experience, okay? And the experience is that it's awesome, right? First off, it's awesome. So, like, there's nobody crosses over. No experience I've ever read, and I've read hundreds upon hundreds of stories of people or listened to them. Nobody who crosses over ever wants to come back. Okay, so that's the first thing. So you don't have to be afraid of that. Like, when you cross over, you're going to want to stay there. You're not going to want to come back. So, like, your relatives might want you to come back, but you're not going to want to. And it's scary, right? You know, when you get to I've had a couple health things, and so, like, death used to be this thing I've talked about. You know, I've lived with it because my dad died when I was 9, right? So, like, it's just something I live with. But now it's more real. So, like, you really start to encounter it differently at a certain age, right? But anyway, that's a thing. And there's a presence of sorts that people often report as a presence. And it depends on what their background is, how they define that presence. So, Christians and Muslims and, will often, people who are Jewish, people who are more monotheistic in their orientation will see it as a singular presence. But other folks will not see it that way. So that's the first thing. The second thing is there seems to be a fair amount of evidence for reincarnation. Yeah. We don't have any evidence for non-reincarnation because you wouldn't know. You die, and that's it. Like you have no idea. But we do have evidence of people who come into this life remembering their past lives. And we see it like with little kids and stuff. So that doesn't mean everybody gets reincarnated, but there is evidence for reincarnation. So I think there's some kind of cycle. But I don't know what it is, you know what I mean? But it was pretty cool, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That's a cool question, by the way.
My question to you is, what's like your goal in life or like your dream? Like, have you already accomplished that yet, or?
No. My goal in life is that when it comes time for me to die, when it comes time for me to die, right? I'm going to assume that I don't die quickly, that I die a little more slowly. And then when it happens to me, I'm really at peace with the process. Like I'm really at peace. That's my goal in life. And I'm fairly close. But the problem is the more I live, the more I have to live for. And the more I hang on to. Like I feel like my life is just starting. As I watch my body decay, like I just look at this body, man. Like look at these, it's like these age marks and stuff. Like God, it's what happens, right? And there's something beautiful about it, and there's something really sad because I have so much more that I think I want to do, and so it's that yearning to do more. I want to be able to release myself of that so I'm really at peace with my final process. Yeah, that's my goal. In a way, it's always been my goal, but I'm just seeing how big of a goal it is, like how big of an obstacle or difficult it is at this stage.
Because you said your goal in life is to basically die at like your most peaceful state, right?
Yeah, not struggle in the final kind of period, not struggle. Yeah.
Okay, because I was wondering, like, how could you be at peace without knowing where you're going after you die?
Well, this is part of the problem, right? And what I just told you about about the afterlife and why I'm investigating it as much as I am, and I talk to people and I listen to their stories, and this is why I'm so fascinated by it and why it pulls me in, because the more stories that seem to line up, the more at peace I am, because it's like, oh, okay. The more I know about communication with the afterlife, like, communication with, the more there is. And so, yeah, that's I guess what I would say. That's why I'm so invested in that. Yeah. Not knowing where I'm going. Because I feel like I'm zeroing in on kind of where I'm going, like what happens, And by the way, can I just say this? Can I say something that's actually kind of cool? One thing that we hear from people in all cultures, this idea that Christians and Muslims have this idea, and Jews a little bit, but that you're going to be judged by God when you die, okay? And you think, like, what kind of God is going to judge us? But one of the things, this is pretty cool, man. One of the things that we hear from people around the world who die is there's this life assessment that people do when they die. And they talk about it. They come back and they go, yeah, I had the life assessment experience. And what it is that there's this life force that just encourages us to look at, and what people say is they see their entire life just flash before them, scene after scene after scene of people they encountered and all sorts of stuff. And they do this assessment, especially focused on all the wrongs all the bad things that they did to people. And what they learned from that is just utter, pure forgiveness and understanding that it didn't matter. It's okay. So, which is cool for like our discussion the other day. And so you have this idea that, Christians will have this idea that, you're going to die and Jesus is going to judge you or whatever. It's like, well, it's true. It seems kind of true, but it's not God and Jesus. It's you that does it. And it's like, and you forgive you go to this place. And it's like, oh, that's pretty awesome, man. That's pretty cool. I don't know if it's true, you know what I mean? But I'm just telling you, I've spent countless hours learning about it.
Well, me personally, I think it make a little more sense that there's a place you're going to be judged, being the fact, and I know we're running short on time, being that there's a place you're going to be judged at.
Yeah.
Because we have these things called like a guilty conscience.
Totally. Where's the guilt come from, right?
But the guilt comes from like, well, I'm Christian.
Yeah. No, the guilt is built into the reality, right? And so this would be a reason. It's like, the guilt is built into our life itself, which is pretty cool to think about that.
Right.
And what people who die and come back, they say like, hey, it's not about guilt. Don't worry about the guilt stuff, right? Because you're going to get to a place of utter peace and forgiveness and understanding. So don't worry about it, but do the best you can, right? Still do the best you can, which is pretty damn cool, actually.
So is that a thought saying that happens after the afterlife or while you're on earth?
In the afterlife, when you get there, right? But we don't know, because we only know stories of people who died and came back. So we don't know anybody who really died, they fully crossed over. So we don't really know if these stories are what fully happens, because you don't know. It's just people who die and they come back. So we don't know. It could be that when you actually fully die, it's a whole different experience. I don't know. Maybe it's like you go to bathtubs and jacuzzis and swimming pools, I don't know. But it's cool. It's the closest we can get. Yeah, which is cool. I like that. Yeah, that's a cool question. Thanks, man.
I was just wondering how you proposed to Laurie.
You know what? I didn't propose to her. Like, we decided together that we would, because Laurie and I do everything together. There was a tree. If you look at Old Main, if you're standing in front of it, there's a huge elm tree on the left in the front. There used to be a huge one on the right. And so we went, this was in September of 1989. We stood under that tree, and I have this earring. It's these overlapping rings, and we made them for each other, and we exchanged earrings, and then we were engaged. And then I went to Ecuador. That's how cute. But we were never going to get married. But what happened was she has epilepsy, and she was on, man. Every time I tell this story, I cry. But she was sitting on a wall on Beaver, and she fell. She had a seizure, and she fell face first on the cement, and the ambulance, somebody called an ambulance, and they took her to the hospital, and I couldn't get in the hospital to see her because I was just her partner. And here she is, like in the hospital. I can't even get to see her. So when I finally did sneak in, I snuck in the emergency room and got around. And what she remembers is I was leaning over the bed, and I said, "We're getting married," right? And she's like, if you have epilepsy, I don't know if anyone has epilepsy, if you ever had a seizure, and she's just like groggy and like, what? And I said, yeah, we're getting married. And that's how we decided to get married, because I couldn't see her. And I'm like, I'm not doing this. We can't do this. If we're living our lives together, and we need to be married. So that's how we got married.
That's really cute.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it takes a seizure. See, bad things happen, good things happen. Like, it's all the same.